Become frugal ninjas. Don't be cheap bastards. Do not take this just verbatim as the only way to live. Please take this as a guiding set of principles. Prioritize what's important to you. Make sure that you're getting the highest utility to cost ratio. Do not just focus on the lowest financial cost solution. What is up, you guys? Matt McKeever here, and so we really need to talk. So Jeff Weibel has been kind of poking fun at me. He's been kind of grilling me a bit on this recently, and for the longest time I didn't want to agree with him, but sadly I think I gotta admit Jeff's right. And so what he's right about is there's a difference between being frugal and being cheap. And so it's awesome that you guys are so excited about this idea of financial independence, this idea of retiring early, that you guys have joined me on the early retirement extreme bandwagon. That being said, I think a lot of people, when they initially go from being that crazy consumerist spendy pants, they almost drift too far to the other extreme and they go full-blown cheap bastard. And so in my opinion, there's a huge difference between being a cheap bastard and a frugal ninja. And that's what today's video is going to be all about. And what it really comes down to is thinking long-term. And so again, we'll dive into all the details in this video. This is not meant to be a judgment, but Jeff actually did have a good point, that far too often we get too hung up on trying to pinch every penny, scrape every little piece of profit from a deal, rather than thinking about the long-term consequences of doing so. So that's what we're going to dive into today's video. Again, this is not meant to be a judgment. This is just my perspective. I'd love for you guys to share your perspective in the video comment section down below. Smash that like button if you enjoyed this video. If you're new to my channel, definitely hit that subscribe button and check out the other videos YouTube wants you to check out. Thanks, guys. Is there a difference between frugal and cheap? And does that difference matter? And why am I even making a YouTube video about it? In my opinion, there is a difference. Cheap really comes down to the lowest cost solution, and particularly we're talking about the lowest financial cost solution. Frugal is all about the highest utility versus cost ratio, or the lowest net cost. And so what I mean by that is, cheap people are really just focused on the financial cost. So they're worried about the dollars and the cents. Where the frugal person's more focused on the overall big picture, the overall idea of whether this makes financial sense. So usually a cheap person, they're going to really just be focused on the cost. They're just going to be focused on the cheap aspect of this triangle, where the frugal person's going to take in all the different factors. And so usually when we're looking on personal finance blogs or personal financial vloggers, often when they're talking about cheap versus frugal, the big debate is cheap versus quality. And completely agree with that. That's really what, as a short form, I think that's the best way to think about the difference between frugal and cheap. Cheap is worried about the absolute lowest cost solution, where frugal is focused on what's the best net utility, what's going to create the best value for myself. And so value isn't just about the financial cost, it's also about the quality, as well as just like the timeliness of receiving it. You know, getting a fantastic deal on a meal is great, but if you're starving to death and that meal comes out 2 weeks from now and you're going to die between now and then, it's really not that great of a financial decision to go with the absolute cheapest solution if it's not going to be timely. Another way I like to kind of look at the difference between cheap versus frugal is cheap is all about I win, you lose, where I think frugal can truly be win-win. So let's break this out with an example again of, like, say, using a restaurant. So a cheap person's going to be focused about how do I get the absolute lowest cost value for this meal, for this product, for the service. So, you know, some cheap people, they'll go, let's say, to a fast food chain and ask for a cup for water and instead go to the soda machine and get a soda. That's being cheap. Not only is that being cheap, that's actually being dishonest, and it's like micro stealing. I'm not really judging you if you've done it. You know, we used to goof around and do it in the past, but it's one of those things where it's really a I win, you lose solution. Or being cheap is stacking coupons on top of coupons on top of a Groupon, and then negotiating with the manager when you get to the restaurant to make sure that you literally never pay a penny out of pocket. That is insanely cheap. Where frugal to me is looking at a restaurant, looking up their menu, looking up their specials. Do they got daily specials? Often a lot of businesses are slow on, say, Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday nights, and so frequently they'll try and entice us customers to come out by making greater deals than they otherwise would during peak hours. So usually a restaurant's not going to give you the best deals on a Friday or Saturday night, because that's when a lot of people are going out to eat. So alternatively, maybe you figure out that, hey, Tuesday nights is cheap nacho nights or cheap wing nights or cheap beer night, and you go there. That to me is actually a win-win. Restaurants already made it obvious that they want more customers coming to their, because the restaurants already made it obvious that they want more customers coming to their establishment by offering these special night deals, Whereas the cheap person will go in on the Saturday night and try and demand the Tuesday night deal because they were busy on Tuesday night and they'll want it on the Saturday. That to me is cheap. Same with like I win, you lose example for me is the idea of like just berating these minimum wage workers at like a Best Buy or at wherever, at Chapters, Indigo, doesn't really matter, but you just berate them, or the grocery store, to the point where they just cave or they have to go get their manager or whatever the case is. Again, that's being very focused on just one aspect of the value proposition here. This is going to be the value proposition triangle. I should name that. Another example of being cheap versus frugal is, let's say you notice that your server forgot to bill you for the second round of drinks. A cheap person will immediately pay their bill and try and run out of there as fast as possible. Where a frugal person, although the fact that they like to get things cheap, they like to get low cost financially, they also understand that this isn't a win-win solution. This is a win-lose solution. That server or that restaurant will lose if you don't pay for goods or services you received. That's just how the economy works, guys. So, you know, a frugal person will be like, hey, I think you actually forgot to charge me for that second round of drinks. And they'll pay it, and they'll even pay a tip on top of that. Where that cheap person, they're running out as fast as possible, and they probably didn't even pay a tip on top of that. And so another big issue between cheap and frugal to me is the sustainability of something. So first of all, I think it's really easy to point out like, oh, going to Walmart and buying this knickknack or that widget for pennies on the dollar that someone that maybe manufactured in a more socially responsible manner could charge, that seems kind of unsustainable. But even beyond that, I mean, I'm starting to see a lot of people, they're taking this almost like us versus them mentality to themselves in any sort of business. And while I can understand wanting to stick it to the big guy, like say a Walmart, the idea of sticking it to your local merchants seems crazy to me. If you love that restaurant, if you love that microbrewery, if you love this activity, you should want that business to profit. If they're providing you net value, you should be more than happy to pay them or reward them financially for the services or the goods they're providing you. And so this idea that you literally never want to pay for anything, think about it if you reverse the situation. Do you want to get paid for the services or goods you provide to your customers or to your employer? Yeah, absolutely you do. So the idea that you should literally get everything for free, or that you should haggle or negotiate and absolutely get the bottom dollar, I think is a very short-term, short-sighted solution. Another thing, another major difference I see personally between cheap and frugal people is, frugal people understand the value of relationships. They understand the value of having people in their network. Where a cheap person, let's say as a landlord, they're going to negotiate so hard with that electrician or that contractor that they're going to make no money working for you. And then they're going to complain about how next time that person doesn't want to come out and do their job site again. Well, why should they? If you've literally negotiated so hard and beat them up so much that they're not making any money for their time, why on earth would they want to come work for you again in the future? Where a frugal person, in my opinion, a frugal person's going to find a great contractor or electrician and not only pay them, but go make sure you pay them fast, make sure you pay them accurately, and make sure you give them positive feedback by maybe referring them to other people in your network, by telling them, you know, that they're doing great work. Whereas the cheap person's always going to find nitpicky things so that they can try and get a bigger discount, another discount, and they're just always saving money. They're just all about saving money, and that's all they're focused on in this value proposition triangle. And again, that's so short-sighted. And the thing is, you gotta be aware too that you eventually build up a reputation about this. So if every contractor, every electrician avoids you like the plague because they know that under no circumstances are they allowed to make a profit on your job site, why would they ever want to step foot on your job site again? And so another way to rephrase the cheap versus frugal debate, in my opinion, is scarcity versus efficiency. So the cheap person is always focused on scarcity. They're always thinking that they need to save as much money as possible. They need to spend as little money as possible. They need to get the maximum reward, the maximum benefit for the least amount being given out. Where the frugal person is more focused on efficiency. So a frugal person will pay for quality or pay for speed. So the frugal person, when looking at the value proposition triangle, is fine with any of these factors depending on what their priorities are and what makes sense from a net benefit proposition. Whereas the cheap person's always just focused on this corner of the value proposition triangle. And again, that's such a short term, such a narrow focus that I think long term will come back to bite you in the ass. If you're the person that's always getting the free drink and never buys a round for your group of friends, eventually your group of friends are going to stop inviting you out for a free drink. There's no such thing as a free ride. And again, I kind of see this as a bigger picture, kind of with the tragedy in the comments. So a cheap person will, you know, constantly use all kinds of free resources, but never pay it forward. They're never going to reinvest. They're never going to donate. So for example, for myself, there's a tax program I love called Simple Tax here in Canada that lets you file your taxes for free. Now it's donation based. And I know I've referred it out to a lot of people on my YouTube channel. And sadly, if I had to guess, I would guess the vast majority haven't donated a penny to Simple Tax. Whereas myself, I use Simple Tax, and when I'm doing my own tax return, I actually pay more than if I was to just buy an off-the-shelf solution. You know, I'll pay $50 just to do my one tax return because, first of all, I love the program they got. I love what they're trying to do, and I love that they make it free and donation-based. So I want to support more of that in the world. So to me, paying that money out is a net benefit because I'm voting with my dollars at this point. Whereas when you're going to Walmart and you're always just buying the absolute cheapest trinket, you're also voting with your dollars. Even if you think they're losing on every financial transaction you do with them. Just think, like, do you only want to do business with other businesses that you actually dislike, that you have a distaste for their business model? I mean, again, it just doesn't feel sustainable. Again, I'm not perfect. I'm not saying anyone's perfect when it comes to the cheap versus frugal balance. You know, there's times in my life where I act cheaply and there's times when I act frugally. I try and act frugally more often than cheaply, but sometimes only with hindsight do you really realize that you were thinking cheaply versus frugally. So, again, no judgment here, but what I often see is people focused on never spending. So like, they'll create adamant rules that like, I never spend on this or I never do that. And so they'll maybe come out to tons of different meetup groups and meetup events we host at for-profit businesses, and all they'll ever get is water. At the same time, that business does deserve to make money. They're providing us with a great service, which is a great meeting space, a great opportunity. They got AV equipment, they got this, that, and the other. And so again, personally for myself, I'll often order a tea or a pop, even if I'm not overly feeling it because I don't drink alcohol anymore, or at least currently I don't. And so I'll get something else, and then I'll just round my bill up to the nearest $10 because I know, again, that the server at one of my financial independence meetups, they're not getting tipped well. And it's unfortunate. I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice in the financial independence retired early community by always being so cheap rather than frugal, because our reputations do follow us. And so it's important that you focus just not on the cost, the financial cost, focus on the big picture cost. What's the cost to your relationships? What's the cost to your network? What's the cost to your long-term health, your long-term prospect of living a longer life? Take all those different factors into consideration when determining whether you should be cheap or frugal. Again, it really comes down to prioritizing what's important to you. It's not about never spending another dollar in your life. It's about spending only on things that actually bring value, bring benefit, bring joy to your life. And so the last thing I just want to talk on, cheap versus frugal. Cheap people find it painful to spend. Frugal people never spend without thinking. And so there's a huge difference there. I will never promote mindless consumption on my YouTube channel. That's insane, that's ridiculous. But finding it painful to spend money on anything is also crazy. Also, and so this isn't necessarily a judgment reflection, but I think someone's going to, anyways, I'm just going to talk about a situation I experienced in one of our financial independence retired early meetup groups where someone accidentally double tipped and they were like freaking out. Now, I want to give the benefit of the doubt, and I'm thinking you were playing it up a fair bit just for the laughs of it. But if you're actually upset that you accidentally double tipped a person once in your life, and that's causing you financial stress, and that's causing you mental stress and mental anguish, your relationship with money's gone too far, in my opinion. I think that you need to sit down and really think things through. Did that double tip really ruin you financially? Or did it actually probably just make someone's day? And so, you know, how can you beat yourself up so much about one of those maybe little financial missteps when not only was it maybe just a mild financial misstep, but at least it was kind of a win-win where the other individual probably brightened their day a bit because they got double tipped, because probably there's lots of times they got stiffed on tips all together that day. So again, I just want to break things out for you guys. Please, when you go out into the world, Do not take this just verbatim as the only way to live. Please take this as a guiding set of principles. Prioritize what's important to you. Make sure that you're getting the highest utility to cost ratio. Do not just focus on the lowest financial cost solution. You're doing yourself a disservice. You're not voting well with your dollars, in my opinion, either. And I think you're just doing a bad branding for all of us in the financial independence retired early community. So that's just my opinion. I'd love for you guys to jump in the video description down below, share your experiences, share your perspective. Do you agree with me on the frugal versus cheap narrative? Or do you think that maybe I'm just staying up in my ivory tower now that I'm financially independent and I forget what it's like to grind and try and save every penny? And I think that that's a fair point. There is a difference when you're starting out, when you're just going from being a crazy consumerist to a cheap bastard to a frugal ninja. And I think that that's a path a lot of us go on. So a lot of us just inherently, we choose the default solution society presents us, which is the crazy consumerist. And that's where you just spend money for everything. You never think about it. You mindlessly spend. You never even consider the value proposition that's being made to you. You just spend, spend, spend. And then what happens is some of us discover early retirement extreme. We discover Mr. Money Mustache. We discover firepreneurship. And then we go from one extreme to the exact opposite extreme, and we become that crazy cheap bastard. That person that reuses paper towels 8 times. That person that, you know, buys in bulk to the point where they need to get an addition to their house, or they need to get another basement or another garage to store shit. There's a happy balance between the crazy consumerist and the cheap bastard, and I think that's the frugal ninja. So I want you guys to go out there, become frugal ninjas, don't be cheap bastards. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel, and definitely check out the other videos YouTube wants you to check out. And until next time, remember, saving money is important, but being a cheap bastard isn't. Thanks, guys. Bye.